The moment my son said, "Mom, don't worry. I've already booked everything for our vacation," something in my chest tightened. Just a little. Just enough for a mother's instinct to whisper, "He's hiding something." But I pushed the thought away because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that for once he was taking responsibility. That he truly wanted to spend time with me after years of distance, silence, and rushed phone calls that always ended with, "I'm busy. Mom." I had saved for years hoping he and I could travel together, just once. Before I got too old to climb stairs or walk beaches or cross airports without help. I told him we'd budget, stay somewhere simple, somewhere warm. He nodded and said, "Leave everything to me." But the truth came crashing into my life the day I saw the email. He left his laptop open on the dining table, and I wasn't snooping, God knows I wasn't. But when I walked past, the screen lit up with a message that froze me in place. "Your payment of $70,000 has been confirmed." My heart slammed against my ribs. 70,000? For a vacation? No hotel on earth would cost that. No plane ticket, no cruise, nothing. Before I could even breathe, my son came rushing out of his room, slamming the laptop shut so fast it felt like he was cutting off oxygen. "Mom, don't look at my emails." I stared at him, my voice barely steady. "What was that payment?" He looked away. "Nothing. An investment. Using my money?" He didn't answer. My throat tightened. "Daniel, what did you do?" He cursed under his breath, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, it's not a big deal. I moved the vacation money into a crypto fund. I was going to double it and surprise you." I felt the room spinning. "You invested $70,000 without telling me?" He raised his voice. "I was trying to help you." "No," I whispered. "You were trying to help yourself." His silence was my answer. That night, while he was in his room arguing with someone on the phone about market dips, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at nothing. I realized something I had ignored for years. My son didn't see me as a mother anymore. He saw me as a safety net, an ATM, a backup plan, and that wasn't love. That was dependency dressed as affection. When he finally walked out and saw me still sitting there, he said, "Don't worry. If I lose it, you can pull from your retirement fund or sell the old house. We'll fix it. He made a mistake." And somehow I was part of the payment. Something inside me snapped in the quietest, strongest way. I lifted my head and said, "Daniel." "I'm done," he blinked. "Done with what?" "With being your backup plan? With being your solution?" He frowned, confused, almost offended. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "You lied," I said softly. "Not just today. You've been lying for years. About your job, your debts, your drinking, your investments. And I kept forgiving you because you are my son. But tonight, something changed." "What changed?" he whispered. "I realized I don't owe you my life." And then, to his shock and anger, I did something he never expected. I stood up, and I walked away. My entire body trembled as I went into my room, opened my drawer, and pulled out the documents I kept hidden. The ones that showed he wasn't on my accounts, wasn't on my property titles, wasn't connected to my finances at all. His investment wasn't my life savings. It was only the vacation fund. $70,000 hurt. But it didn't destroy me. Daniel followed me into the hallway, his voice shaking now. "Mom, don't do this. Don't turn your back on me." I looked at him with a calmness I didn't know I still had. "I'm not turning my back on you. I'm turning my back on being used." He reached for my hand. "I'll change. I promise." And maybe he meant it, but promises mean nothing without sacrifice. So I said the hardest words a mother can ever say. "I love you, Daniel, but I'm choosing me." He stared at me, stunned. Before he could respond, I grabbed my small suitcase, the one I had packed earlier, when I suspected something wasn't right, and headed to the door. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To finally take that vacation." "With what money?" I smiled sadly. "With a cheaper trip. A simpler one. A peaceful one. One that doesn't cost my sanity." And then I left. No shouting. No tears. Just a quiet departure from a life I had outgrown. I traveled alone for the first time in 30 years. I sat on beaches and listened to waves instead of excuses. I ate food I didn't cook. I slept without fear of a phone call asking for money. Somewhere between sunrise and sunset, I realized something beautiful. The $70,000 he lost was the price of my freedom, the cost of discovering I deserved a life too, not just survival, but joy. A few weeks later, I returned home feeling lighter, stronger. Daniel wasn't waiting at the door. He had gone to stay with a friend, but he left a note for me on the table. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm getting help. I want to be better. For me, for you." I held that note for a long time. $70,000 didn't destroy me. It rebuilt me. And losing that money was how I found myself again. Days passed after I returned from my trip, and the silence in the house felt different. Not heavy, not sad, but peaceful. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts instead of my son's demands. I could breathe without waiting for the next crisis. I could wake up without fearing the sound of his footsteps or the vibration of his messages, asking for just a little help. I made tea in the quiet kitchen, walked barefoot on the balcony, opened curtains and let sunlight warm places that had been cold for too long. And somewhere in that quiet, I began realizing how small I had made myself just to keep the peace. How many dreams I had buried to not stress him. How much of my life had been spent patching holes he punched into his own future. But peace has a way of uncovering wounds. 2 weeks after my return, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Daniel stood there. Not with arrogance, not with excuses, not with manipulation. He stood there like a man who had been stripped of every lie he'd ever used to protect himself. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes tired, his hair unkempt. He looked like someone who had finally met his own reflection and didn't like what he saw. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking instantly. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside silently, letting him in. He didn't sit. He didn't make himself comfortable. He stood in the center of the living room like someone entering a courtroom, ready to confess. "I went to rehab," he said, trembling a little. "Just for 2 weeks. That's why I wasn't here." I blinked, surprised. "Rehab?" He nodded. "Not for alcohol. For gambling addiction." His voice cracked. "Money has controlled my whole life, Mom. Every time I get it, I lose it. Every time I lose it, I lie. Every time I lie, I hurt you." He swallowed hard, tears forming. "And that day, when I used our vacation money, I didn't just lie. I put you in danger. I put you in debt. I broke your trust." I sat down slowly, my heart trembling. "Daniel," he lifted a hand. "No, let me finish. I need to say this. I need to look you in the eye and admit everything." His chest rose sharply, and the truth poured out. I didn't lose $70,000 in one night. I lost it over months. Small amounts, big amounts, then everything you gave me for the trip. I kept promising myself I'd win it back. And when I didn't, I promised myself I'd hide it. I was ashamed. "Mom," his voice broke. "I was so ashamed I forgot how to love you." Silent tears slid down his cheeks. Then his voice softened, almost childlike. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." I didn't move. For a long time, I just watched my son, the same son I once carried, once fed, once prayed over, finally face himself without hiding behind me. He wiped his eyes. "I'm seeing a therapist. I closed the gambling apps. I blocked the people who enabled me. I'm working extra shifts." His voice steadied. "And I came to return this." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it gently on the coffee table. Inside was $10,000. "I know it's nothing compared to what I owe. But it's a start. I want to rebuild, not just my finances, but our relationship. I want to be your son again, Mom, not your problem." I stared at the envelope. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't the money. It was the man standing in front of me, vulnerable, honest, broken, but finally real. Slowly, I stood up and walked toward him. He flinched slightly, as if expecting rejection. Instead, I placed my hands on his trembling shoulders. "Daniel," I whispered, "you didn't just lie about the vacation. You lied to yourself for years, but now you're telling the truth. And that is worth more than any money. He cried then, quietly, painfully, resting his forehead against mine like he did when he was a child afraid of thunderstorms. I want to change, Mom, he choked. I want to be better. I held him close. You already started. We stood like that for a long moment, letting the past drain out of us and the future slowly fill its space. When he finally pulled away, he wiped his face and forced a shaky smile. Can we try again? Not with vacations, not with money. Just with us? I nodded. Yes, but with one condition. He blinked. Anything. No more secrets, I said gently. Truth, even when it's ugly. Even when it hurts. He nodded immediately, tears shining again. Truth, he whispered. I promise. He hugged me again, this time with sincerity. Not guilt, not fear, not expectation. Just love. And in that moment, I realized something. The $70,000 wasn't a loss. It was the price of breaking a cycle that would have destroyed us both. It was the cost of him meeting his truth. It was the doorway to a new version of my life. And his. Cutting that money didn't ruin us. It saved us. Daniel stayed for hours that day. Not because he needed anything. Not because he wanted money or comfort or rescuing. But because for the first time in years, he simply wanted to be with me. No noise, no tension, no hidden agenda, just presence. And that alone felt like a miracle. We sat on the balcony later in the evening, the sky slowly turning orange as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. He stared out quietly, his expression softer than I'd seen in years. Mom, he finally said, voice steady now. I figured something out at rehab. I looked at him gently. What did you learn? He sighed deeply, eyes glistening a bit. I wasn't addicted to gambling. Not really. I was addicted to escaping. Escaping responsibility, escaping fear, escaping the disappointment I felt in myself. He paused, voice cracking. You were always there, always forgiving, always fixing, so I never had to face anything. I felt something heavy fall from my shoulders, the truth I had known but was too afraid to admit. I enabled you, I whispered. He turned sharply. No. Daniel, I continued softly. Love becomes poison when it removes consequences. I protected you so much, you never learned how to protect yourself. He closed his eyes, the pain visible on his face. I know, and I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a moment, letting his words sink in, letting mine soften between us. Then he said something that made my heart ache in a different way. I was always afraid of disappointing you. You were so strong, so stable, so perfect. I didn't want you to see how weak I was. I shook my head slowly. Daniel, I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to be honest. He swallowed hard. I'm learning, I smiled faintly. So am I. A light breeze brushed past us. It carried something new, something fragile but full of hope. He leaned back in his chair, staring at me thoughtfully. You know, Mom, when you left for that solo vacation, it broke something in me. I raised an eyebrow gently. Broke? Yes, he admitted, but in a good way. It broke the illusion that you'd always be here waiting to catch me. It made me realize you have a life, a whole life, dreams, wants, needs, and I never asked about any of them. I touched his arm. Daniel, you were my dream. He smiled sadly. And you're still mine, Mom. But now I know dreams can exist together, not just one crushing the other. I closed my eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by how much he'd grown in such a short time. Then he said something unexpected. Mom, tell me about your vacation, not the money part, not the escape part. Tell me what you saw, what you felt. It startled me, the sincerity in his voice. So, I told him about the ocean, about the sunrise I watched alone, for the first time in years, about the strangers who taught me, dances on the beach at night, about the taste of food I didn't cook, about laughing, really laughing, without thinking about consequences or responsibilities. He listened with his whole heart. You were happy, he said softly. I was free. I corrected gently. He nodded slowly. I want that for you. Not just once. Always. There was a long, emotional pause before he added, and I want that for myself too. I reached over and squeezed his hand. We can learn together. His face softened, almost childlike. Will you go on another trip someday? With me? My breath caught. For years, I begged him to take time for us. For years, he dismissed me, and now he was asking. I smiled. Yes, but next time, we budget together. He laughed. A real laugh. Deal. It was small, simple. But it felt like a promise. A new beginning. When he stood up to leave, he hugged me tightly. The kind of hug that holds exhaustion, apology, and love all at once. Mom, he whispered against my shoulder. Thank you for choosing yourself. You taught me how to choose myself too. I closed my eyes. And thank you for coming back. You taught me that change is possible. When the door closed behind him, the house didn't feel empty. It felt lighter, warmer, alive again. Because my freedom didn't come from running away from my son. It came from finally teaching him how to stand on his own. And in the end, that $70,000 wasn't a loss. It was an investment, not in money, but in truth, boundaries, healing, and a mother finally reclaiming her life. The months that followed were nothing like the years before. For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't show up at my door asking for money, favors, or forgiveness. Instead, he visited with groceries, with flowers, with books he thought I'd like, and sometimes with nothing at all except a quiet, genuine desire to spend time together. Healing doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in 1,000 small ones. Like the day he came to fix my leaking sink and said, I didn't call a plumber because I want to learn how to do things on my own. Like the time he sat on the carpet assembling a bookshelf and muttered, I could have asked you to pay someone, but I want to take responsibility for my own messes now. Or the day he admitted, Mom, sometimes I still feel the urge to gamble. But when I do, I think about how sick you must have felt losing that money. And it stops me. Every sentence, every action, every decision chipped away at the old Daniel and shaped the man he was becoming. But the biggest change came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. We sat at the park, birds singing overhead, families walking by, children chasing each other in the open field. Daniel leaned back on the bench, staring at the sky, and said something I never expected. Mom, I'm afraid to love someone again. I glanced at him gently. Why? He swallowed. Because I keep thinking, what if I mess up again? What if I hurt someone? What if they see the old version of me and run? Everyone has a past, I said softly. What matters is that you're not living in it anymore. He exhaled shakily. I just want to be better. You are, I said. You're proof that people can grow. He turned to me with a small, almost shy smile. What about you, Mom? Do you ever think about loving someone again? I laughed quietly. At my age? Yes, he insisted. You deserve happiness too. His sincerity touched me deeply. Maybe for the first time in decades, someone was asking me about my life. Not what I could give, not what I could fix, not what I could sacrifice, but what I wanted. That night after he left, I sat on my bed and let that question linger in the quiet. Do I deserve happiness? Do I deserve companionship? Do I deserve more than survival? And to my surprise, the answer in my heart whispered, yes. It wasn't long before life responded to that whisper. One afternoon, while attending a community support group, the same one I encouraged Daniel to join, I met someone. A gentle man with soft eyes and a voice calm enough to soothe tired hearts. His name was Michael. He was a widower, quiet, respectful, healing from his own wounds. We didn't speak much at first, just exchanged polite smiles, shared tea after meetings, walked the same direction home. But emotional wounds recognize each other. Pain recognizes pain. Healing recognizes healing. One day he said, You travel alone often? I smiled. I do. It's peaceful. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe one day we could take a quiet trip. 2 separate rooms. He chuckled nervously. but the same destination, the way he respected my boundaries. The softness in his tone, the gentleness in his eyes, it was something I didn't even know I had missed. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply smiled. And he understood. Weeks passed, and our quiet friendship deepened. We shared stories of our lives, his late wife, my late husband, our children, our fears, our hopes. I told him about Daniel's struggle and the $70,000 I had lost. He didn't judge. He didn't lecture. He simply said, "Sometimes losing money saves lives." And I realized something profound. He wasn't talking about the money. He was talking about my son and me. One evening, Daniel met him by accident when he came to pick me up from the center. Daniel stiffened at first, protective, nervous. But Michael extended his hand with a warm, steady smile. "I've heard so much about you," he said. "Oh?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Your mother speaks about your progress with pride," Michael continued. "You're rebuilding yourself. That's not easy." Daniel blinked, surprised. No judgment, no assumptions, just respect. On the drive home, Daniel was quiet for a long time before he finally spoke. "Mom, I like him." I tried to hide my smile. "He's just a friend." Daniel shook his head lightly. "Maybe, maybe not." He looked at me with soft eyes. "But if someone makes you smile the way I saw today, you deserve to keep them around." My heart swelled. "Mom," he added gently, "you spent your whole life loving me. Maybe it's time someone loves you." Tears gathered in my eyes as I reached over and held his hand. "I love you, Daniel," I whispered. He squeezed my hand. "I love you too, Mom, and now I'm ready to love you the right way." And for the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. The $70,000 didn't just buy freedom. It bought clarity, healing, rebirth. A new relationship with my son. A new chapter of life for me. It didn't destroy my world. It saved it. That evening, after all the months of rebuilding, after all the tears, apologies, and quiet breakthroughs, Daniel invited me to the beach, the same beach I once sat on alone during my first solo vacation. But this time, I wasn't alone. The sunset painted the sky with soft strokes of orange and gold, the waves whispering against the shore like they carried secrets only the ocean understood. Daniel spread out a blanket, but he didn't sit right away. He just stood there staring at the horizon, hands in his pockets, the breeze ruffling his hair like he was a little boy again. I watched him quietly. He turned to me suddenly, eyes glistening. "Mom, do you forgive me?" I smiled softly. "I forgave you the moment you chose to face the truth." He nodded, swallowing the emotion rising in his throat. "I want to be better. Not because you expect it, but because you deserve a son who makes you proud." "You already do," I whispered. He sat beside me then, leaning gently against my shoulder. For a long moment we said nothing, just listened to the waves, letting the silence heal the last pieces of what once felt broken beyond repair. Then Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out a small wrapped box. "What's this?" I asked, surprised. "Just open it," he said with a shy smile. Inside was a simple silver bracelet, but attached to it was a tiny charm shaped like an airplane. I looked at him, touched. "Daniel, it's beautiful," he breathed out shakily. "It's a promise that our next vacation will be together, a real one, a healthy one, a happy one." My eyes filled with tears, but before I could speak, he added softly, "And this time, Mom, I'll be the one taking care of you." The bracelet trembled in my hands because my own hands were trembling too. I leaned my head against his, feeling the bond between us stronger than ever. "We'll go anywhere you want," I said gently. He smiled. "Anywhere you want." The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the water, and for the first time in years, I felt something warm and steady settle in my chest. Peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't come from money or perfection, but from healing, understanding, and choosing love over pride. As the waves washed over the sand, Daniel whispered, almost to himself. Losing that $70,000 saved my life. I took his hand and held it tightly. No, I said softly. It saved both of us. And there, under the fading sunset, with the ocean stretching wide before us, and forgiveness settling like a prayer between us, I realized this wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a new one, where love wasn't heavy, where responsibility wasn't a burden, and where freedom didn't mean walking alone, but walking forward together.